left off, we're in Section 2, the Republic of Rome. We are covering the years from 509 to 30 BC. Now, we are at 229 BC. Rome has gone from controlling just a city-state in 509 to, bam, controlling the entire peninsula and Sicily. Now, they have done this by winning their wars in Italy, which is a section we just got through covering, which was wars that they were having with their neighbors, basically, in the Italian peninsula. But this also consisted of an invasion by the Ephraim Greeks that we covered, and they defeated the regional naval supremacy power of Carthage. Bam! So the Romans are on a roll, and they must be doing something right. Now, let's take a look at the region we're going to cover here in the next section. We are covering the Republic's Wars of Defense. And let's take a look at the Greek region. Now, Greece looks something like this at this time. You have the Macedonians. Now remember, this is the old Alexandrian Empire. You have the Macedonians controlling most of this northern area. You have Ephraim here controlling this. You have the Aetolian League, which were city-states that allied themselves with each other mainly against the Macedonians. You have the Achaean League in the Peloponnesian area that allied themselves against any would-be aggressors from the Greek mainland and by sea. And then you have the Athenians and the Boeotians, who were longtime allies all the time, rounding out the total Greek area. Now, the Greeks have the same issue here as basically the Italian peninsula have. There's a lot of different kingdoms, and they all war with each other, and not one of them wants one player to become a dominant player. Otherwise, you're going to be controlled, and you're going to have an overlord. So there's constant alliances being shifted back and forth. They're allies, and then they're fighting each other because nobody wants one power to become too strong. Now, as of what happened in the Italian peninsula, the Romans have succeeded in dominating their region. Now, I want to say something right now. I want to stop here and say something. For anybody that wants to say that the Romans, we're going to say at least if they think the Romans started out to be militaristic, imperialist Nazis, conquering warmongers, I'm going to disagree with you. And I'm going to say for two reasons here. The first, the reason you look at the facts of history, they have multiple wars against the same neighbors, like 3 against the Carthage. They had 3 against the Samnites, a couple against the Latins. I'm going to show you they're going to have 3 against the Illyrians, 4 against the Macedonians, 2 against the Syrians. So they're having multiple wars, which to me is proof that they're just not trying to go out and conquer them. They're trying to come to some agreement. Okay, that's my first reason. My second reason is, let's say, for example, you take Attila or Genghis Khan. When they were conquering, they just rolled up on a city and they said, look, you're going to pay me tribute and I'm going to be your master, or I'm going to sack you. That's pretty much what they did for most part of their conquering. There was no negotiations. There was no mutual agreement. For the most part, there was not. They were just conquering. The Romans didn't do that. The Romans were always negotiating. They were always trying to come to a mutual agreement with their neighbors. Let me tell you why. Because the Romans want to prosper. The landowners in the beginning, they all want to get wealthy and they want to get rich. Well, you can't really do that if you're getting destroyed and you're causing your resources to be wasted in wars. So at the same time as the Romans were trying to protect themselves with their city-states as they were fighting their neighbors, and as they were conquering them, they were trying to keep a status quo around the area, for they felt it would be safer for them. And if that became too unstable, then they would have to step in and fight. Now, the same thing is happening here on the Greece mainland. I already covered what is happening here. It's the same situation. Nobody wants to become too strong and dominated. So when the Romans started fighting the Carthaginians in the First Punic War, in their wars in Italy, they were watching what was happening over in the Balkan, Greece area here. They knew that this one kingdom, it was a tribe, an Illyrian tribe, and a man by the name of King Argon was in control of it. Well, they were becoming somewhat of an empire. They were controlling most of their Greek neighbors, and they were producing, and in fact had a very large navy. And in fact, the Illyrians became renowned as master craftsmen for building ships. So they were recognized. Rome knew about them, and Rome watched them. Now, as King Argon was sailing up and down the Adriatic here, and going into the Cyclades area and conquering Greek seaports, he was controlling these seaports and getting wealthy, and in return his kingdom was growing. Most of the Greeks didn't like it. The Macedonians, who were probably the biggest empire, or they were, didn't do anything about it. They actually liked it, and they allied with King Argon because they wanted to control all of Greece. So there was an empire forming here. Now, the Romans, the reason we labeled this section Republic Wars of Defense, because just as they felt in their home territory, if the areas around them were unstable, then that conflict, an empire living right next to them, would eventually spill over to them, would control the resources, control the trade, and therefore come in conflict with Rome. So Rome wanted a stable areas around them, wanted them to be stable. They wanted everybody to be equal. They wanted to keep the status quo. The British Empire did the same thing in Europe. They wanted to keep the status quo all the time. You didn't want one power getting too strong. And the Romans felt the same way. That's why the Roman historians call this the Republic Wars of Defense. Now, in fact, Rome actually sent ambassadors to go talk to King Argon to see what the situation would be like, since they were both in the Adriatic and had vessels there, and they would both be looking to control the sea trades. They were willing to talk, which further gives you reasons to believe that the Romans were not Nazi warmongers. They were willing to talk, and they were sending two ambassadors over, and the Illyrians, whether they were pirates or not, they attacked the ships and sunk the ship with the magistrates on them and killed them. Now, Rome was involved with Carthage at the time, and they didn't want to really get involved with the Illyrians, but they watched them now, and they were very suspicious of them. However, when the Carthage War ended and King Argon died, his wife took over, Queen Tuta, and she started to pretty much openly sanction piracy all along the Adriatic and the Cyclades. Now, when Rome didn't, now Rome again is watching this, but they're not getting involved yet until the Greeks finally say, look, the Illyrians are too much of a problem. They're controlling all our seaports. They're taking Greek cities. They took Epideios. They took Ypres, and they were doing this up and down the coast. Well, the Greeks, couldn't get the Macedonians to do anything about it, which was the big power over there. So they started looking at the Romans. They said, wow, the Romans had just defeated a major empire who was known as the greatest sea power in the area. They just kicked their butts. They did, kick the Ephrates' butts. Boy, these Romans are badasses. Let's ask them for help. And they did. Well, the Romans, always eager to get involved with keeping the status quo with their neighbors, they said okay. But again, another proving my point that they weren't warmongers. They didn't just send an army over there. They sent two ambassadors. Okay, so they sail over there. They go talk to Queen Tuta. They said, hey, you got to stop this piracy stuff. You got to stop dominating all the Greek city-states. They're not digging it. And she says, well, I can control my navy, but I can't control the pirates. Well, it was pretty well-known fact that she was sanctioning the pirates and allowing them to and supporting them to go on their quest. It's sort of like what England did to the Spanish in the 16th, 17th century. They were allowing English ships to sail as pirates and attack the Spanish, sink their ships, take their money, under a pirate flag, and then those ships would sail back to England and split their winnings and give their winnings to the Queen. Well, Queen Tuta here was doing the same thing, and everybody knew it. So one of the Roman ambassadors gets pretty upset about it, and he's going to head back. So the ambassadors start heading back, and he's going to go tell the Roman Senate what this lion flipping, bee is doing. Well, guess what? Queen Tuta kills him. Now, this story, they're not quite sure if it was fabricated by the Romans or not. But the fact is, again, the Romans went over there to negotiate, not just to conquer. But some say the Romans might have fabricated this story so they can stop the Illyrians. But remember, they had already sent ambassadors over there when King Aragon was around that were killed, and the Romans didn't do anything about it. They were fighting another war. So they did try a couple times, and each time their ambassadors were killed. So I don't blame the Romans, whether they made this story up or not. They couldn't allow the Illyrians to run around and get dominant, especially when the Greeks didn't even like it. So the Romans, under the consul Fulvius, he sailed his 200 ships to Corcyra, and he raised the siege. Now, despite having learned that the general Demetrius, he had already taken the city, and he was allied with Queen Tuta, but when he heard the Romans were coming, he actually turned the city over to the Romans. So he was working with the Romans secretly now, because him and Queen Tuta were not getting along. So Corcyra welcomed the Romans with the aid of Demetrius, and the garrison surrendered. And then the city became a friend of Rome. Now, another consul, Postumus, he brought an army of 20,000 infantry and 2,000 cavalry to Apollonia, which now joined the Roman alliance. And then these two forces marched up to Dyrrhachium and raised that siege. So all the cities had been coming to the Roman side and opening negotiations with the Romans. So the Romans were taking control of the whole area. And then lastly, they went to Issa and raised the siege there. And so with the whole control of the entire coast back under Roman or Greek control, the Romans halted their operations. Further proof that the Romans were not warmongering Nazis trying to control everything. But at this point, Queen Tuta was holed up in her capital, and she realized things weren't going well, and she sent ambassadors over to Rome, and they came to an agreement. And Rome now controlled a few cities here on the coast. The red area you see on the coast where Macedonia is, that was under Roman protection, and they installed Demetrius, gave him his kingship back on the island of Pharos. They returned. Fulvius and his army went back to Italy. The other consul, Postumus, stayed in this Roman-controlled area. These cities were under Roman protection. Guess what? A second Illyrian War starts. It's 219. Demetrius, remember of Pharos, he waited for an opportunity to return to Illyrian piracy after his defeat alongside Queen Tuta 10 years earlier. Now, with Rome in conflict with the Gauls and Carthaginians, because the Second Carthaginian War was starting, he saw an opportunity. But yet again, there was no large engagements that took place. But he was having success raiding the Cyclade Islands again while Rome was in conflict with Carthage. However, Rome did react swiftly this time, sending Lucius Aemilius, and he marched straight on Demetrius' stronghold at Pharos, and Demetrius escaped to Macedonia. But with war looming with Hannibal, Rome had to just strengthen its hold on the Illyrian coast, but little else could be done at this time. And look at this map here. You can see the blue areas in the next to Macedon from the First Illyrian War, and then along the Illyrian coast, the blue areas. The Romans now control that after the two Illyrian Wars. Between the First and Second Illyrian War, the Romans had heard of the Carthaginians and the Celts forming some alliance to invade Rome from the north. And so they went into northern Italy, and now they occupied the northern part of Italy in the Po Valley. They own it. They own the entire peninsula now. And they named this region up here Cisalpine Gaul, which means Gaul this side of the Alps. Now, after the First Punic War, the Carthaginian treaty limited her expansion in the Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain, to south of the Ebro River, which is right here. And what stood within the influence of Carthaginians' control was the city of Saguntum. Now, even though the city was in the Carthaginian influence, it was an ally of Rome. And Hannibal decided to attack it, and he laid siege to it. It lasted for 8 months, and then the city finally surrendered, and Hannibal accepted its surrender. But this started the Second Punic War. Now, Hannibal had a couple problems if he was going to invade Italy by land. Is the Roman navy could invade Africa in Tunisia. So he thought if he can get there fast and do this march in the time of winter when nobody expected it, because the campaign seasons were, remember, from March to September, he thought this would stall a Roman invasion going to Africa, and if he can get some quick victories, he might pull off a surrender of Rome. His other problem would be supply. Remember, it's always supply when it comes to the war games we play and in history. He did not want to worry about his supply lines coming from Spain through France into Italy. So what he was hoping was, he said, forget his supply, and as he marched into Italy, he was hoping that he can get a seaport somewhere in Italy, and then he can receive supplies from Carthage straight into the seaport. So he wasn't worried about supplies except for what he carried. So that was his plan. It was a gamble. His march from Spain into Italy was one of the most extraordinary feats that has ever taken place in ancient history. Now, Hannibal started his long trek to Italy along the coast, normally like most ancient armies did. Now, he picked to cross his first barrier, the Pyrenees Mountains, between the border of France and Iberia, or it'd be Gaul and Iberia in the ancient days. And he picked this town of Luperthus. And Luperthus is situated right here on the coast, and this is what it would look like today, coming through these mountains at this area. He crossed this in the springtime, so it wasn't as bad as like it was when he was crossing the Alps. Now, as he's moving through Gaul territory, he is getting supplies and help from Gaulish tribes, and he's moving through southern France. Now, he knows the Romans, everybody has spies. The Romans are going to try to intercept him at some point, and he knows they're gathering forces. So he decides to move away from the coast because he understands that a Roman fleet is sailing toward him. So he moves off of the coast as he's approaching the Rhone River at the Alps. Now, as he crosses the Rhone, he realizes there's hostile Gauls on that side that the Romans are using as their allies, and Romans could be there, and he even gets ambushed as he's entering the Alps here. So he moves farther north to stay away from the coast and Gauls and the Romans. So he moves up to Valence, and he picks this point here to come across the Alps. And then there's two routes they think he could took: the St. Bernard Pass and then the lower route here. But no matter which route he took, he comes out of the Alps into the Po Valley and at Turin, and that's where he comes out at. But if we use Livy's accounts, because Polybius and Livy wrote on it, and they use the same sources actually, but Livy doesn't claim some of the sources, but we believe that the northern route would have been more unlikely through the St. Bernard Pass, as some has claimed. It's higher in altitude. He was marching in November, extremely cold up there, so he probably went more to a southerly route. We believe he took the southern route. Now, Napoleon came through Mount Cenis, which is in this village area right here where they have these markers at Brahmins, which is the route Napoleon advocated and took. So we don't think he did that. We think because he had to build camps like at least 3 times, and he had to carve out some roads and make some roads for his elephants, we believe the only suitable spot for that to be would have been at Mont Guinevere. And we believe he came through modern Brancon and Mont Guinevere and then headed into Turin. And remember, he does this in November and there's snow on the ground as he's coming through the passes. Now, for the Romans' part, what were they doing while he was crossing the Alps? Well, first, remember, the Romans were allying themselves with some Gaulish tribes, and they were harassing Hannibal and even ambushed him as he was coming over the Rhone into the Alps here, which could have been this spot right here on the French side of the Alps as he's entering here. So that's why he would go more north, but he didn't go as far north as St. Bernard Pass, as we already said. Now, a Roman general, Cornelius Scipio, he took a fleet and he came to Marseille, which is Marseille here on the coast, and he tried to attack Hannibal before he got into the Alps. But when Scipio arrived, he saw that Hannibal had already passed him. So he went and took off to Spain. He thought, well, I'm going to go take his supply sources and his bases in Spain. Now, the figures that Hannibal took into the Alps was somewhere between, we'd say, 25 and 40,000 men, probably about 6 to 12,000 cavalry and 40 elephants. Now, Livy tries to say that Hannibal lost 20,000 men in the Alps. We don't believe that at all. If any commander would have lost that many, it would have been so demoralizing to the army, and I mean, the army wouldn't have been able to go on. We believe it was more between 500 and 1,000 men. Now, he did lose most of his elephants. He had 40 elephants. He came out with less than 10. And then another little fact is Publius Scipio was watching the Po Valley with his legions, and he didn't know where Hannibal would exit the Alps at, so he had to stay back. But once he seen where he was coming from, he just sent a skirmishing force up there. And the skirmishing force got overrun by the Carthaginian cavalry. So I think at that point he saw that he was coming out with, a large force, and so he made sure he pulled back to the Trebia River. So Hannibal was able to rest his men. He rested for 3 days. It was a badly needed rest. He just did a 15-day trek over the Alps in winter, and the Romans let him rest. He rested 3 days, then he started campaigning again. And then he went to confront Scipio, and they met their first major engagement at the Battle of Trebia. Now remember, part of Hannibal's plan is he didn't bring any supplies. He was going to get supplies in Italy, capture a seaport, get reinforcements and supplies from Carthage. Remember, his trusted troops are in Africa. I mean, he can get Italian allies here, and he just got Gallic allies, but they're still not the most trustworthy, because they'll change sides or they'll run in a battle because their stakes are not the same as the Carthaginians. So he has to move quick. Now remember, it's winter. Most armies don't campaign or fight in winter, but Hannibal's got to move. So he moves up to the Trebia River, where Scipio's forces are waiting on the other side. This is what the battleground looks like here. You see this area right here. This is sort of a plains area that gets flooded, or a lot of water, and in winter it freezes over. Hannibal comes up to this spot, and he doesn't want to fight in this area right here. It's not good for his troops, and so he does a couple things here. One, he sends his younger brother Mago off to the side to go hold some better ground. Now, this is what a decisive leader does. You remember King Pyrrhus, he did not do that at the Battle of Asculum. He lost a day fighting before he decided to prove his ground. Well, not Hannibal. He goes and he sends his cavalry force, some of it, to hold better ground in case he has to move and fight there. Now, second thing he does is he sends cavalry out to entice the Romans. And, you know, a lot of armies did this all the time. They'll run at the camp, fire their arrows, slings, javelins, turn and run, and they'll constantly harass the Romans until the Romans have enough and they go chase them. Now, there's a second council there with Scipio, and his name is Tiberius Sempronius Longus, and he's going to move out to confront Hannibal because the enticement works, and Scipio advises against it, but he moves his legion out, and he crosses the river, and now Hannibal has the Romans on the ground that kind of sucks. So Hannibal decides to stay right there. The Romans form up, and the battle starts. Now, the battle's going pretty well for the Romans. Their Roman heavy legionnaires are getting the best of the Carthaginian heavy infantry in the center. They're pushing back. However, Mago returns from his spot and he attacks the Roman lines all in the rear, and Hannibal sees Mago coming back, and so he sends his cavalry forces around the flanks too. So basically the Romans get surrounded here and destroyed. Half of those Roman soldiers here made it back to where Scipio was. Now when the Gauls, they see, remember, they're sitting on the sidelines. They just don't join the forces right away, because if they join the losing force, then the Romans are going to go destroy their villages, their city, their women and children, and wipe them out. So they kind of watch to wait to see what happens. And when they saw that Hannibal won this battle, 10,000 Gallic warriors decide to join Hannibal. So the Romans have to pull back. Hannibal now winters in the northern Po Valley area and waits till spring. So he waits about 2 more months here now. Now after winter quarters, what the Romans did was send Publius Scipio over to the Iberian Peninsula in Spain to aid his brother in campaigning in Spain against the Carthaginian strongholds there. And why they did that, they sent 2 different armies north. One was Gaius Flaminius. They sent him north to Arzazo on the west side of the Apennine Mountains, and then they sent Servilius Geminus to the east side of the Apennines. And what they were trying to do was trap Hannibal between the 2 armies. Now, Hannibal had moved past them as he was moving, cutting a swath of destruction in Italy. He was moving toward Rome. He had crossed the Apennine Mountains to the east side and was moving south toward Rome. And he went between the 2 armies. Now, as they went between them, Hannibal knew the one big army was on the east side with them. And what he did was he hid inside the mountains at Lake Trasimeno. And he had 35,000 Africans, Spanish, and Gauls, and they were in the woods overlooking the lake area. As the Romans turned back and were marching along it, he ambushed them. It was one of the bloodiest ambushes in history. The entire Roman army was killed or captured, including Flaminius. Now, this was a good 30,000 Romans. And then Hannibal turned east, went back across the Apennine Mountains, and he met Servilius and destroyed his one legion of 4,000 men. Hannibal here is starting out, he's 3-0 in major engagements right now. Now, one was the siege at Saguntum in Iberia, but the last two battles were major engagements against Roman forces, and he defeated them. And now Hannibal can march toward Rome. Rome is screaming in fear. Hannibal the cannibal is coming, and we're doomed. And we'll see what happens in the next video. Rome's war record goes to 23-12. They didn't get the loss for Saguntum because the Roman army wasn't defending that city. But we'll keep track of Hannibal's too. He's 3-0.